While Suge Knight is scared in protective custody, they gon' body him. The man who was feared by all is now being called out by gang members and the media for hiding in his cell and not coming out. It's been a long road for the once vicious rapper, and it seems like his reign of terror has finally come to an end. Suge Knight was affiliated with the LA Bloods, but he was also disloyal. He spent his time trying to intimidate anyone that was in his way with the army of Bloods behind his back. He also used them to create conflicts with the Crips that surrounded Bad Boy Records. Suge was so dirty he also stirred up conflict between the Bloods themselves, so he could eventually take over the gang. At some point, Suge would lose his status with the gang, and they would see him for his ways. Now that he's behind bars, both of these gangs are looking for redemption.
Jai White,
Okay.
the actor,
Yeah.
right, but also an actual martial artist and
I know of
really
him.
big,
Yeah.
a big, muscular, tall dude, right?
Yeah.
And he told me an interesting story. He said he'd run into Suge, a few times here and there, right?
Suge Knight's reign of terror. Born Marion Hugh Knight in Compton, California, April 1965. He was affectionately called Sugar Bear by his family. Over time, he adopted the nickname Suge. He had a reputation and a sense of business that had an influence on major events in hip-hop, despite spending most of his career behind bars. He broke into the record label industry during the 1990s, and in no time achieved remarkable success as a record executive. His label, Death Row Records, put out some killer albums that are now West Coast classics. We all know about Dr. Dre's The Chronic, Snoop's Doggy Style, and Tupac's All Eyes on Me. Suge was all about bringing gangster rap to the masses and making it mainstream. But he was also about destroying anything that tried to slow him down. Suge first got himself arrested for domestic violence when he chopped off his girlfriend's ponytail and pushed her around. He also got busted just a few weeks later for attempted murder and carrying a concealed weapon while driving a stolen car. The story goes that Suge jacked the car and even fired shots at the victim during the whole crazy ordeal. He ended up copping a plea and got sentenced to a couple of years on probation. Fast forward to '99, Suge started his own music publishing company. He hit the jackpot early on when Vanilla Ice used material from his ghostwriter for the song Ice Ice Baby. When the hype died around the smash song, money stopped coming in. Rumor has it that Suge got all gangsta and helped Vanilla Ice off a hotel balcony until he signed over his royalties. This was later discredited during an interview with Vanilla Ice, stating these rumors are not true. People still speculate whether this happened or not.
Stories, though, because the story with Suge is they were holding you over a balcony.
Right, which never happened.
Did
I sat there.
Anyway, Suge started managing artists too, and his first big clients were DJ Quick and the DOC, West Coast legends in their own right. Through them, Suge connected with Dr. Dre and NWA. But here's the crazy part. DOC and NWA were already signed to Eazy-E's Ruthless Records. So what did Suge do? He and his crew supposedly rolled up with baseball bats and lead pipes, straight up intimidating Eazy-E's people to let them out their contracts. It worked, and that's when Suge and Dre founded Death Row Records in '91.
Tried to destroy my record company with the help of others, Dre. So right now we're getting everything back together and we finna come out, fully loaded.
In '92, Suge went and messed up his probation by getting into a scrap with two rappers at some Hollywood recording studio. He didn't play innocent and pleaded no contest, which landed him another 5 years of probation in '95. That same year, Dr. Dre dropped The Chronic, and that was the first huge success for Death Row Records. That shit blew up big time, going triple platinum and making Suge and Dre some of the biggest names in hip-hop. The following year, Snoop Dogg dropped Doggy Style, keeping the winning streak going for Death Row. You would think that with all this major success, Suge would have calmed down a little bit and started to enjoy his achievements. But that's not really what happened. At some point, Uncle Luke from 2 Live Crew released a track called Faking Like a Gangster, which was a diss track aimed at the West Coast life Death Row was about. At a hip-hop convention in '93, word got out that Suge was strutting around with a stolen gun, looking to find Uncle Luke. All this craziness would come throughout his career. Eventually, Suge calls out Puff and Bad Boy Records, telling any rapper that wanted a real record deal to go sign with Death Row. This would be the first public display of the beef between the two crews. Not long after, Tupac was signed to the label.
And one other thing I'd like to say, any artist out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the record, dancing. Come to Death Row.
In June 1996, Tupac would release the track Hit 'Em Up, which is believed to be one of the most savage diss tracks of all time. On the track, Pac viciously insults Big and claims that he slept with his wife. He also throws some shots at other East Coast rappers, like Junior Mafia member Lil C's and the legendary Mobb Deep. This track further pushed the East Coast-West Coast beef and turned it into an all-out war. Behind the scenes, Suge was also adding fuel to the fire. He paid a visit to Uptown Records where Puff started his career and convinced major artists like Jodeci and Mary J. Blige to leave the label and sign with his management company. Puff confronted Suge about this at a party hosted by Jermaine Dupri in Atlanta, and a fight broke out. Suge's bodyguard, Big Jake, ended up shooting Puff's childhood friend and bodyguard Anthony Wolf Jones. The East Coast-West Coast beef was no longer just in music. Blood had been spilled, and even the fans were forced to choose who they supported. Then, in September 1996, Tupac was killed in a drive-by shooting at an intersection in Las Vegas. Hip-hop as we know it would be completely different if we didn't lose Pac. R.I.P. During this time, Suge was still a member of the Bloods and was still causing all kinds of tension between the gangs. A fight broke out between Suge's crew and Orlando Anderson, which brought attention to the courts. He was still on probation after pleading guilty to assault in 1995, and starting a gang fight in the lobby of a hotel was a major violation of his probation. So, once again, he was found guilty of violating his parole and was sent to an additional 9 years in prison. The end of Suge Knight.
New and disturbing video that will impact the murder case against media mogul Suge Knight. The video obtained by TMZ shows the January 29th incident where Knight's truck apparently runs over the two men. The truck backs up, hits one man. Seconds later, the truck comes back and runs over that man. We've had to, digitize the video because it's very violent. And then it also runs over.
On January 29th, 2015, Suge and two men got into an argument on the set of Straight Outta Compton. These two men were Cleabone Sloan, a gang member turned actor, and Terry Carter, a music executive and founder of Heavyweight Records. The argument would later move to a diner in Compton, where one of the men began coming at Suge in his truck. In the footage, Sloan approached Knight's truck, resulting in a physical confrontation. The truck reversed, knocking Sloan down, and then accelerated, running over both Sloan and Carter, who was standing on the sidewalk, killing one of them and injuring the other. Back in court, the jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision, with 7 jurors in favor of holding him accountable.
What I do know is that your unrepentant, remorseful, callous, unashamed actions took my dad's life away. My dad's last moments of life were blasted all over TV, the internet, social media.
But it seems Carter's family isn't giving up. They are going to be back for another trial. But in the meantime, the court has settled on a mistrial. Immediately after the mistrial, his lawyer, David Kenner, had a conversation with him over the phone in the courthouse hallway. Knight, currently serving a 28-year sentence after pleading no contest of voluntary manslaughter. So, Suge has been in prison for a minute now. He's locked up with all his old homies from the Bloods and from the Crips. They haven't forgotten the things Suge did during his reign of terror. Suge destroyed the Bloods from the inside and caused so many deaths on both sides. These two gangs have such a deep hatred for this man, and Suge has nowhere to hide.
I think he was scared to come out the cell, or he was just like, he didn't want to be a part of that?
Well, he had to be scared because he didn't come over here with us.
We now have members of these gangs coming out and saying that Suge is straight up scared. They have Suge in protective custody for his high-profile status and concerns for his safety. But this doesn't exclude the fact that he doesn't want to leave Solidarity.
That's what I was speaking to. I was showing them. I was trying to illustrate, based on what we talked about, me and Suge. But hey, man,
There were so many murders that are directly related to the hands of Suge Knight, and the gangs are looking for blood. Suge's son commented about his father's safety and health, saying, "Solitary confinement is crazy." They're obviously trying to break his spirit. It's not just the gangs, but also the guards messing with Suge. He's getting picked on little by little and not allowed utensils to eat with or TV time, and he's just locked up alone by himself. Anyone knows being alone for too long will make anybody go crazy. Suge is worried for his life. And even though all this sounds horrible, we can't forget everything that Suge did in his past. Aside from all his arrests, he was also a ruthless employer. One journalist came out and spoke about the horrific things that would go down in the office, dragging people into the back and beating them while they screamed and tried to escape. Suge was known for bringing an onslaught of men around with him, mostly Bloods, and anyone that was on the opposite end was not walking out of it. Now the tides have turned, and it looks like Suge is not having much luck getting out of this one. Suge has attempted multiple ways to try to get an early release. He has addressed his health issues to the courts and has had some surgeries during his sentence. But the judge has denied any type of release. Unfortunately for him, he is stuck in a predicament that he brought upon himself. To make matters worse, a court order has been brought back into the situation from 2005. This order is facing Mr. Knight to pay $107 million to an ex-employee of Death Row. Lydia Harris. She originally sued Suge, claiming she was the official vice president of the company back in 1989. Apparently, she was forced out when things started getting good, and she was never given her cut. Suge almost caught a break because back in September 2019, Harris claimed that she did not want to continue with the process, and her and Suge had apparently settled this out of court. Suge dodged a bullet here, right? Well, no, not really, because 3 months later in December, the judge decided that he was going to open this case back up because the lawyers of Harris were owed 40% of this large sum, and Harris would receive the other 60%. Judge Sotelo stated, "This is a super old case with big names and big money involved." Sounded like the judge wanted his spot in the limelight. Either way, it's shitty luck for Suge. The guy now has the thought of having to cough up $107 million while sitting his ass in prison. I guess what comes around goes around. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications, because you know we'll bring some more on this topic when it surfaces. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Stay blessed, y'all.